In the luminous skyline of Boston, the Horizon Tower stood as a testament to modern architecture, its glass facade reflecting the city's ambitions. For Emma Wilson, a 24-year-old cleaning staff member, the towering structure represented both a livelihood and a painful reminder of dreams deferred. Each evening, as the executives and entrepreneurs departed, she arrived with her cleaning cart, moving through the deserted hallways like a ghost. Tonight, as autumn rain lashed against the windows, Emma checked her watch. 9:15 p.m. Her shift had officially ended 15 minutes ago, but she needed to complete the executive floor before heading home to the small apartment where her grandmother lay bedridden and her teenage brother waited for help with his college applications. Just one more floor, she whispered to herself, tucking a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. In her pocket rested a worn sketchbook filled with architectural designs, buildings that existed only in her imagination, dreams that had once seemed attainable when her father, a brilliant engineer, was still building his company, before Hyperion Enterprises had orchestrated a ruthless corporate restructuring that swallowed smaller firms like her father's, leaving their family in financial ruin. Pushing her cart toward the service elevator, Emma stifled a yawn. The exhaustion of working double shifts weighed on her shoulders, but the responsibility of caring for what remained of her family left her with little choice. The architecture program at MIT would have to wait another year, if she could ever save enough. As she entered the elevator, the lights flickered ominously. The weather report had warned of a severe thunderstorm, but she hadn't anticipated how ferocious it would become. Just as the doors began to close, a deep voice called out, "Hold the elevator, please." Emma instinctively pressed the door open button, not realizing her action would change the course of her life forever. Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Global, stepped into the elevator. At 30, he was already a legend in Boston's business world, not just for his exceptional business acumen that had expanded his family's company into a global empire, but also for the tragedy that had shaped him. 5 years earlier, a devastating car accident had claimed his parents' lives and left him permanently blind. Since then, he had learned to navigate the world through touch, sound, and scent, developing an almost preternatural awareness of his surroundings. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice resonating in the confined space as he moved to the opposite corner, his guide cane tapping lightly against the floor. He stood with perfect posture, his tailored suit accentuating his athletic build. Despite never seeing his face clearly in media photos, Emma recognized him immediately, the man whose company had absorbed Hyperion Enterprises after they had destroyed her father's business. Before she could respond, the elevator began its descent. 3 floors down, a tremendous lightning bolt struck the building, plunging them into complete darkness as the elevator jerked to a violent stop. "Are you all right?" Alexander asked, his voice calm despite the situation. "Yes," Emma replied, trying to mask her anxiety, "just startled." Alexander reached into his pocket and extracted his phone. "No signal," he said after a moment. "The backup generators should kick in soon for the emergency lights, but the elevator might take longer to reset." Emma nodded before realizing he couldn't see her. "Right," she said aloud, pressing the emergency button repeatedly. Nothing happened. "The communication system seems to be down as well." For several minutes they stood in silence, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and the occasional creak of cables above them. The darkness was absolute for Emma, but for Alexander it was his constant companion. "You're part of the cleaning staff," he stated, rather than asked. Emma raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" A slight smile played at the corner of his lips. "The faint scent of lemon cleaner on your hands, the sound of a metal cart outside the elevator before you entered. The slight rustling suggests a uniform rather than standard business attire." "Impressive deduction," she admitted. "Necessity breeds adaptation," he replied. "I'm Alexander Reed." "I know," Emma said, unable to keep a note of coldness from her voice. If Alexander noticed her tone, he didn't comment on it. Instead, he loosened his tie slightly. "It's getting warmer in here. The ventilation must be affected as well." The elevator shuddered suddenly, tilting slightly to one side. Emma gasped, losing her balance and stumbling forward. Alexander reacted with surprising speed, reaching out to stabilize her. His strong hands grasped her shoulders, preventing her fall. "Careful," he said, his voice closer now. "The cables might be straining." Emma found herself mere inches from him, close enough to detect the subtle scent of his cologne. Something expensive but understated, with notes of sandalwood. Despite herself, she noticed how his unseeing eyes seemed to look right through her, their pale blue intensity undiminished by his blindness. "Thank you," she managed to say, pulling away gently. She reached for her pocket instinctively, checking that her sketchbook was still there. "What's that?" Alexander asked, his head tilting slightly at the sound of paper rustling. Emma hesitated. "Just a notebook." "You seem protective of it." "It's nothing important," she lied. Another tremor shook the elevator. This time Alexander moved purposefully, positioning himself near the doors. "Move to the corner," he instructed, his CEO voice emerging naturally. "Hold on to the railings. If the elevator drops, you'll want to be as far from the center as possible." Emma complied, gripping the metal railing tightly. "How do you know what to do in this situation?" "After losing my sight, I became obsessed with preparing for emergencies," he explained, his voice matter of fact. "When you can't see danger coming, you learn to anticipate it in other ways." The elevator groaned ominously, the sound of metal straining against metal filling the small space. Emma's heart raced. "Are we going to be okay?" Alexander didn't answer immediately, his head cocked as if listening to the elevator's complaints. "The backup brake system should engage if we start to fall," he finally said. "But I won't lie to you. We're in a precarious position." As if to punctuate his statement, the elevator lurched downward several inches before catching itself with a violent jerk. Emma couldn't suppress a scream as she was thrown against the wall. Alexander maintained his position, one hand firmly grasping the railing, the other extended outward as if measuring the space. "Talk to me," he said, his voice steady despite the crisis. "It helps to focus on something else." "What should I say?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "Anything. Your name would be a good start." She hesitated only momentarily. "Emma. Emma Wilson." "Emma," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. "Do you like working here, Emma?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. "It pays the bills." "But it's not what you want to be doing," he observed. "No," she admitted. "It's not." The elevator shuddered again, and Emma found herself continuing, words spilling out as if the danger had unlocked something within her. "I was supposed to be studying architecture at MIT by now. I had a scholarship lined up and everything." "What happened?" Alexander asked, his attention fully on her despite the precarious situation. Emma swallowed hard. "Life happened. My dad's company went under after a larger corporation orchestrated a takeover of their main client. Then he got sick. Someone had to take care of my grandmother and make sure my brother still had a shot at college." Alexander's expression changed subtly, a slight furrow appearing between his brows. "I'm sorry to hear that. What was your father's company?" Before Emma could answer, the elevator dropped again, this time falling nearly a foot before jerking to a stop with enough force to send Alexander stumbling toward her. Emma reached out instinctively, helping to steady him as he had done for her earlier. Their faces were inches apart now, his breath warm against her cheek. For a suspended moment, neither moved. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No," she whispered, acutely aware of his proximity, of the strong arms that had reflexively wrapped around her for stability. Then, like a gift from above, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the elevator in a dim red glow. Emma could now see Alexander's face clearly, the strong jawline, the scar that traced a thin line from his temple to his cheekbone, and those startlingly blue eyes that saw nothing, yet seemed to perceive everything. "The lights are back on," she told him. Alexander nodded, releasing her slowly. "That means the main system should restart soon." As if on cue, the elevator hummed back to life, the regular lights replacing the emergency glow. The digital display blinked, showing they were stuck between the 30th and 29th floors. What neither of them knew as they stood in that suspended metal box was that their unexpected encounter had just set in motion events that would force them both to confront painful truths, uncover buried secrets, and perhaps, if fate was kind, offer a chance at redemption, and something neither had dared to hope for. A future where the shadows of the past no longer dimmed the light of possibility. When the elevator finally reached the lobby 20 minutes later, rescue workers were already waiting. The building's security team had detected the malfunction and called for assistance. The storm continued to rage outside, lightning illuminating the darkness beyond the glass doors in sporadic flashes. "Mr. Reed, are you all right?" A concerned security guard rushed forward, ignoring Emma completely. "I'm fine, George," Alexander replied, his voice resuming its professional timbre. "Please make sure Ms. Wilson gets home safely in this weather." Emma blinked in surprise at his consideration. "That's not necessary." "I insist," Alexander interrupted, turning in her direction with unexpected precision. "It's the least we can do after the elevator incident. The company car is available." Before Emma could protest further, her attention was drawn to the lobby television. The volume was low, but the images were unmistakable. A news segment about Reed Global's latest acquisition was playing, showing footage of Alexander at a press conference announcing the finalization of a deal with Hyperion Enterprises. The ticker at the bottom read, "Reed Global completes controversial acquisition of Hyperion, former subsidiaries to undergo restructuring." The world seemed to slow down as pieces clicked into place in Emma's mind. Hyperion, the company that had destroyed her father's business before being acquired itself, and now here was the man responsible for it all, standing before her, offering her a ride home as if he hadn't been the architect of her family's downfall. "It was you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm outside. Alexander frowned. "Pardon?" "Reed Global acquired Hyperion Enterprises last year," Emma said, her voice strengthening with each word. "Before that, Hyperion orchestrated a hostile takeover of Wilson Engineering's main client, forcing my father's company into bankruptcy." Alexander went still, his expression shifting imperceptibly. "Wilson Engineering," he repeated slowly. "John Wilson was your father?" "Yes," Emma confirmed, surprised he knew the name. "The company he built from nothing was destroyed, and 6 months later he suffered a stroke from the stress. He can barely speak now, let alone work." The lobby seemed suddenly cavernous, the space between them expanding despite their physical proximity. The security guard glanced awkwardly between them, sensing the tension but unsure of its source. "Emma," Alexander began, his voice different now, "there are aspects of that situation you may not be aware of." "I'm aware of enough," she cut him off, anger flaring. "Your company's restructuring is a polite corporate term for destroying people's livelihoods. Do you have any idea how many families were affected? How many dreams were shattered because some numbers on a spreadsheet didn't satisfy your profit margins?" Alexander's jaw tightened, but he didn't immediately respond. Outside, lightning split the sky again, followed by a crash of thunder so loud it seemed to shake the building's foundation. "George," Alexander finally said, "please give us a moment." The security guard nodded and retreated to a discreet distance, though his concerned gaze remained fixed on his employer. "The acquisition of Hyperion was complicated," Alexander explained, his voice low. "When we purchased them, we inherited many decisions that had been made before our involvement, including what happened with smaller companies like your father's." "That's convenient," Emma scoffed. "Blame it on the previous management while you reap the benefits." "It's not that simple," he insisted. "After the accident that took my parents and my site, my uncle Calvin took control of day-to-day operations. I only recently resumed full leadership after years of rehabilitation and learning to navigate the business world with my disability." Emma studied his face, searching for signs of deception, though she knew he couldn't see her scrutiny. "So you're saying you had nothing to do with what happened to my father's company?" "I'm saying I wasn't aware of the specific tactics used in the Hyperion acquisition, especially regarding their previous business practices," Alexander clarified. "But that doesn't absolve me of responsibility as the head of Reed Global now." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain against glass and distant thunder. Emma's anger remained, but confusion now tempered. The man before her, the one who had shown such presence of mind in the elevator, who had asked about her dreams with what seemed like genuine interest, didn't align with the heartless corporate shark she'd imagined behind her family's downfall. "I should go," she finally said, her voice weary. "My grandmother will be worried, and my brother has a college application due tomorrow." Alexander nodded. "At least let George drive you home. The storm is getting worse." Too exhausted to argue, Emma acquiesced. As she turned to leave, Alexander called after her. "Emma, may I ask for your phone number? I'd like to continue this conversation when we're both less—" He gestured vaguely at the space between them, affected by tonight's events. Emma hesitated, suspicion warring with curiosity. "Why? Because I believe in making amends where possible," he answered simply. "And because I'd like to hear more about those architectural dreams you mentioned." Against her better judgment, Emma recited her number, which Alexander committed to memory with the same efficiency he applied to everything else in his lightless world. "Good night, Emma Wilson," he said formally. "I hope we'll speak again soon." As Emma was driven home through the rain-slicked streets of Boston, her mind replayed the evening's events: the trapped elevator, the revelation about Alexander's connection to her family's misfortune, the unexplainable tension that had developed between them, something that went beyond anger or attraction, something that felt almost like recognition. At home, her grandmother was asleep, but her brother Tyler was still awake, hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table. "Where have you been?" he asked without looking up. Grandma was worried. "Trapped in an elevator during the blackout," Emma replied, hanging her damp jacket on the hook by the door. "With Alexander." "Reed?" That got Tyler's attention. "Wait, the Alexander Reed, the blind billionaire?" "The very same," Emma confirmed, collapsing into a chair. "And guess what? His company is the one that bought Hyperion after they destroyed Dad's business." Tyler whistled low. "Talk about a cosmic joke. What was he like?" Emma stared at the ceiling, considering the question. "Not what I expected," she finally admitted. "In what way?" "He seemed human." She laughed humorlessly. "I know that sounds ridiculous, but I've spent so long picturing this faceless corporate monster that I never considered there might be an actual person behind it all." "Did you tell him about Dad?" "Yes," Emma said, recalling the subtle shift in Alexander's expression when she'd revealed her identity. "He claims he didn't know the specifics of how Hyperion operated before his company acquired them." Tyler raised an eyebrow. "And you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," Emma admitted, "but he wants to talk again." "Are you going to?" Emma pulled her sketchbook from her pocket, running her fingers over the worn cover. "Maybe, if only to make him understand what his company's actions really cost us." The next morning dawned bright and clear, the storm having spent its fury overnight. Emma arrived at the Horizon Tower earlier than usual, having barely slept. To her surprise, a security guard was waiting for her in the lobby. "Miss Wilson? Mr. Reed would like to see you in his office at your earliest convenience." Emma's heart raced. "Did he say what about?" "No, ma'am, but he was quite insistent." Anxiety and curiosity battled within her as she rode the executive elevator to the top floor, the same elevator that had been their prison the night before. When she arrived at Alexander's office, his assistant, a poised woman in her 50s, greeted her warmly. "He's expecting you," she said, opening the door to the inner sanctum. Alexander's office was a study in thoughtful design, a space created for someone who navigated by touch and sound rather than sight. Everything had a place. Edges were subtly rounded, and textures varied to provide tactile landmarks. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston that Alexander could no longer appreciate, but that took Emma's breath away. Alexander himself stood by the windows, his back to the door, seemingly contemplating a view he couldn't see. He turned when he heard her enter, his movements precise. "Emma," he said, her name sounding different in the daylight hours. "Thank you for coming." "Your security didn't exactly make it seem optional," she replied, remaining near the door. Small smile touched his lips. "Warren can be overzealous. I apologize if you felt pressured. An uncomfortable silence followed. Emma shifted her weight from one foot to the other, acutely aware that while she could see Alexander perfectly, he was experiencing her only through sound and presence. "I spent most of the night researching Wilson Engineering," Alexander finally said, moving to his desk and touching a raised pattern on its surface, a tactile interface of some kind. "Your father was indeed caught in Hyperion's expansion strategy 3 years ago. The tactics used were aggressive." "That's one word for it," Emma said bitterly. "Devastating would be another." Alexander nodded, accepting her correction. "After looking into the matter, I discovered something troubling. Hyperion's acquisition strategy at that time was overseen by my uncle Calvin Reed, even before Reed Global purchased Hyperion itself." Emma stared at him, trying to process this new information. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Alexander continued, his voice grave, "that the connection between our families runs deeper than I realized. My uncle apparently had his eye on Hyperion for years and was orchestrating moves from behind the scenes even before the formal acquisition. Your father's company was collateral, damage in his larger strategy." The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. "So it wasn't just business, it was calculated." "Yes," Alexander admitted, "and while I wasn't directly involved, the Reed name was. That makes me responsible in ways I can't ignore." Emma sank into one of the chairs opposite his desk, her anger momentarily displaced by shock. "Why are you telling me this?" Alexander moved around his desk with practiced ease, taking the chair nearest hers. "Because I believe in facing uncomfortable truths, and because I want to make you an offer." "An offer?" Emma repeated, skepticism evident in her voice. "What kind of offer?" Alexander leaned forward slightly, his unseeing eyes directed just past her left shoulder. "2 offers, actually. The first is professional. I want to create a compensation fund for all the small businesses affected by Hyperion's predatory practices, starting with Wilson Engineering, full restitution with interest." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The amount would be substantial, enough to cover her father's medical expenses, her grandmother's care, Tyler's college tuition. Perhaps even enough to resurrect her own dreams of architecture school. "And the second offer?" she asked cautiously. "A job," Alexander replied. "Not in cleaning services, something that would utilize your actual talents." Emma's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about my talents? We spoke for less than an hour in an elevator." A small smile played at the corner of Alexander's mouth. "You mentioned architecture studies, and I may have done some additional research this morning. MIT scholarship, finalist, top of your class in high school, multiple design competition awards. You've been investigating me," Emma stated flatly, unsure whether to be flattered or disturbed. "I prefer to call it due diligence," Alexander countered. "Reed Global is currently planning a community development project in one of Boston's underserved neighborhoods. We need someone with fresh perspective and genuine understanding of what communities actually need, not just what looks good in a portfolio." Emma sat back, mind racing. The opportunity was extraordinary, a chance to design something meaningful while still in training. But suspicion lingered. "Why me? There are hundreds of qualified architects in Boston." "None with your particular motivation," Alexander said simply. "You have personal investment in ensuring corporations like mine don't steamroll over people's lives. Your perspective would be valuable." "So I'd be what? Your corporate conscience?" Emma asked with a bitter laugh. "You'd be an architectural consultant with real input into the project," Alexander corrected. "Whether you also choose to be my conscience is entirely up to you." Before Emma could respond, the office door opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered without knocking. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his custom suit screaming old money and privilege. His eyes, the same, striking blue as Alexander's, widened slightly at the sight of Emma. "Alex, I wasn't aware you had a meeting scheduled this morning," the man said, his tone pleasant, but his gaze calculating as it swept over Emma. "Uncle Calvin," Alexander acknowledged, his posture subtly shifting. "This is Emma Wilson, We're discussing a potential project. Calvin Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. Wilson. Any relation to John Wilson of Wilson Engineering? Emma stiffened. My father. Ah. A flicker of something, recognition, concern, crossed Calvin's face before he masked it with polite interest. Small world indeed. I hope you'll excuse the interruption. Actually, Alexander interjected, Emma and I were just discussing the Community Development Initiative. She has some innovative ideas that align with our new corporate responsibility direction. Calvin's smile tightened. I wasn't aware we'd finalized plans for that project. The board is still weighing the financial implications. The board approved the preliminary budget last quarter, Alexander countered smoothly. Implementation details are at my discretion as CEO. The tension between them was palpable, an undercurrent of power struggle beneath the veneer of familial respect. Emma watched, fascinated despite herself, as Calvin seemed to recalculate his approach. Of course, Calvin finally conceded. I just want to ensure we're proceeding cautiously with new initiatives given the market volatility. Perhaps we could discuss this further at the executive committee meeting this afternoon. I'll see you then, Alexander agreed, effectively dismissing his uncle. Calvin nodded curtly, cast one more measuring look at Emma and departed. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow managed to convey disapproval. Your uncle doesn't seem thrilled about your community development plans, Emma observed. Calvin has always prioritized traditional metrics of success, Alexander replied diplomatically. He believes corporate responsibility initiatives are PR exercises at best, wasteful sentimentality at worst. And what do you believe? Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering his response. I believe that after you lose your sight, you gain perspective on what truly matters. Money creates opportunity, but legacy is built on impact. His sincerity surprised her. Emma found herself studying his face, the strong jawline, the slight scar near his temple, the eyes that couldn't see yet seemed to perceive so much. For someone raised in wealth and privilege, Alexander Reed was unexpectedly thoughtful. I need time to consider your offers, Emma finally said. Of course, take the weekend to think it over. Alexander stood, indicating their meeting was concluding. My assistant has prepared a folder with details about the compensation fund and the project position. No strings attached to either. You can accept one, both, or neither. As Emma rose to leave, Alexander added, And Emma, whatever you decide, I appreciate your honesty. It's refreshingly rare in my world. The folder Ms. Harrison handed her was heavy with potential, life-changing information concealed within crisp manila paper. Emma tucked it into her bag, her thoughts a tumult of possibility and doubt as she left the executive suite. Rather than heading home immediately, Emma found herself walking toward the Boston Public Garden, seeking space to think. The aftermath of the storm had left the city washed clean, the late autumn sunlight glinting off puddles and rain-slicked benches. She found an empty bench overlooking the lagoon and opened the folder. The compensation proposal was staggering, far more generous than anything required by law or ethics. The position description was equally impressive, a genuine role with significant creative input, not the token gesture she'd suspected. You look like you've either won the lottery or been handed a prison sentence, a voice observed. Emma looked up to find Tyler standing before her, backpack slung over one shoulder. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in class? Professor cancelled, he shrugged, dropping onto the bench beside her. I saw your text about meeting Reed and figured you might come here afterward. This has always been your thinking spot. Emma smiled despite herself. For all his teenage bravado, Tyler had always been perceptive. She handed him the folder wordlessly. His eyes widened as he scanned the documents. Holy, he breathed. Is this for real? Apparently. And what's the catch? Tyler asked, ever the pragmatist despite his youth. That's what I'm trying to figure out, Emma admitted. On the surface, it seems like Alexander genuinely wants to make amends. But his uncle clearly has different priorities, and Reed Global is still the company that benefited from Dad's downfall. Tyler flipped through the project description again. This job, though, it's basically what you've been dreaming about. Getting paid to design something meaningful while finishing your degree. I know, Emma sighed, but what if it's all just an elaborate PR move? Look at us, hiring the daughter of a man our business practices destroyed. We're so progressive and remorseful. Does it matter? Tyler asked bluntly. Even if their motives aren't pure, the money would change everything for us. Dad could get that specialized therapy the doctors recommended. Grandma wouldn't have to worry about her medication costs. I could go to college without drowning in debt. Emma reached for her sketchbook, a habitual gesture when she needed to ground herself. And what about Alexander himself? Yesterday I thought he was the enemy. Today I'm not sure what to think. Maybe he's both, Tyler suggested, a product of his privileged upbringing who's trying to be better than the system that created him. When did you get so insightful? Emma asked, bumping her shoulder against his. Someone in this family has to be, he teased, then grew serious. Em, I know you're worried about selling out or something, but maybe this is just, I don't know, karma finally swinging back in our direction. Emma stared out at the lagoon, watching a family of ducks navigate the water's surface, together, but each following their own current. I'd be working closely with him, she mused. The man I blamed for years. Is that the real problem? Tyler asked shrewdly. That you might actually like him if you get to know him better. Emma shot her brother a look. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from what you've told me, he's smart, successful, and actually seems to have a conscience which puts him ahead of most corporate types. Plus, Tyler added with a mischievous grin, you mentioned he's good-looking like 3 times in your story. I did not. Strong jawline, perfect posture, intense blue eyes, Tyler quoted, batting his eyelashes dramatically. Your words, not mine. Emma shoved him playfully. I was being descriptive, not swooning. Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night, Tyler laughed, dodging her next swipe. Seriously though, Em, this could be good for all of us. Maybe even for you specifically. As they sat together in companionable silence, Emma's phone chimed with a text message. Unknown number. This is Alexander Reed. I realize my offer might seem sudden. If you have questions or concerns, I'm available to discuss them. No pressure. How did he text you? Emma wondered aloud. He can't see a phone screen. Voice to text, probably, Tyler suggested. Advanced accessibility tech. The real question is, are you going to answer? Emma stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. After a moment's hesitation, she typed, I have many questions. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? The response came almost immediately. Name the place and time. I'll be there. Across town, in his penthouse apartment, Alexander set his phone down after his assistant confirmed the message had been sent. He moved to the window, placing his palm against the glass, feeling the warmth of the sun that he could no longer see. Are you sure about this, Alex? His assistant Diana Harrison asked from the doorway. Calvin was livid after your meeting. He's already called 3 board members. My uncle has always struggled with change, Alexander replied calmly, particularly when it threatens his vision of how things should be done. This is more than just a corporate responsibility initiative, Diana observed carefully. This is personal for you. Alexander turned, his expression thoughtful. When you lose your sight, other senses become more acute. In that elevator, I heard something in Emma's voice. Determination despite defeat, passion despite pragmatism. When she spoke about architecture, there was a quality to her words, a blueprint of possibility. She's the daughter of a man whose company was destroyed partly due to your uncle's machinations, Diana reminded him gently. That makes this complicated. Life is complicated, Alexander countered. But right and wrong don't have to be. My parents built Reed Global on innovation and integrity. Somewhere along the way, under Calvin's influence, those values became flexible. It's time to course correct. Diana had worked for the Reed family for 15 years, long enough to recognize the quiet resolve in Alexander's voice. Calvin won't make this easy, she warned. He never does, Alexander agreed with a wry smile. But then, nothing worthwhile ever is. What neither Alexander nor Emma realized as they prepared for their coffee meeting the next day was that forces were already in motion. Wheels turning within wheels, old secrets surfacing, and Calvin Reed making calls to people who specialized in ensuring problems disappeared before they could threaten what he'd spent decades building. The cafe Emma chose for their meeting was deliberately modest, a small independently owned establishment far from the financial district where Alexander typically conducted business. The Bell Jar Cafe smelled of fresh coffee and homemade pastries, its mismatched furniture and local artwork creating an atmosphere of creative authenticity. Emma arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table that offered some privacy while still being in view of other patrons. She wore casual clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, and her favorite cardigan, a deliberate choice to remind herself and Alexander that this meeting was on her terms. At exactly 10 a.m., the cafe door opened and Alexander entered, accompanied by a discreet security officer who scanned the room before nodding and stepping back. Alexander moved with surprising confidence, his cane tapping lightly as he navigated the space. Several patrons glanced up curiously, recognizing the famous CEO despite his casual attire of dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow managed to look both relaxed and expensive. "Alexander," Emma called softly when he'd made it a few steps inside. His head turned immediately in her direction, a small smile forming on his lips as he moved toward her with unerring accuracy. "You're directly ahead 12 feet, his security officer murmured discreetly before stepping back to a table near the entrance. "Emma," Alexander greeted as he reached the table. "Thank you for suggesting this place. It smells wonderful." "They roast their own beans," Emma replied, watching as he located the chair opposite her and sat down with practiced ease. "And the pastries are made in-house. I'll have to try both then." Alexander set his cane against the table edge. "How are you today? Have you had a chance to review the materials?" Emma studied him, trying to reconcile the powerful CEO with the man sitting across from her, whose fingers subtly explored the edges of the table to establish his bearings. "I have. They're generous." "But you have questions," he prompted. "Many," Emma confirmed, starting with why now? Hyperion's acquisition of my father's client happened 3 years ago. Your company took over Hyperion a year after that. What suddenly inspired this attack of corporate conscience? Alexander didn't flinch at her directness. Several factors coincided. I only fully resumed control of Reed Global Operations 6 months ago, after years of rehabilitation and adaptation following my accident. During that time, my uncle had significant autonomy. Once I returned, I initiated a comprehensive review of all acquisitions and their consequences. "And you just happened to notice Wilson Engineering in the wreckage?" Emma asked skeptically. "Actually, yes," Alexander admitted. "Your father's company stood out because the acquisition pattern didn't make standard business sense. The way Hyperion undercut Wilson. Engineering's client relationships seemed deliberately targeted, not strategically necessary. It raised questions. A server approached and they paused to order a black coffee for Alexander and a latte for Emma, plus a selection of pastries to share. Even if that's true," Emma continued once they were alone again, "compensation and a job offer seem excessive for someone you met by chance in an elevator." Alexander's fingers traced the edge of the table, a gesture Emma was beginning to recognize as a thinking habit. "Do you believe in meaningful coincidences, Emma?" "Not particularly." "I didn't either, until I lost my sight," he said quietly. "When your world goes dark, patterns emerge in other ways. The elevator breaking down, your identity, the project we're currently developing. It felt significant." Before Emma could respond, his phone buzzed. Alexander touched his earpiece. "Yes, Diana?" He listened for a moment, his expression tightening. "I understand. Tell them I'll call in remotely. No, don't reschedule." Another pause. "Thank you." He refocused on Emma. "Sorry about that. Board politics waits for no man, not even one having coffee." "Your uncle," Emma guessed. Alexander's smile was wry. "Calvin believes I'm being distracted from more important matters." He's called an emergency session to discuss project prioritization. Because of your community development initiative? Partially, Alexander acknowledged. Calvin prefers traditional expansion strategies. Community projects don't align with his vision for Reed Global. Their coffee arrived, and Emma watched as Alexander located his cup with precise movements, added a single packet of sugar, and stirred methodically. Nothing in his actions suggested helplessness or dependency, just adaptation. You still haven't really answered why, Emma pressed after taking a sip of her latte. Why me specifically? Boston is full of talented architects and designers who don't have complicated histories with your company. Alexander set his cup down carefully. 2 reasons. First, your perspective is uniquely valuable precisely because of that history. You understand firsthand the impact of corporate decisions on real lives, something many consultants with pristine resumes can't comprehend. And the second reason? Alexander hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. Your sketchbook. Emma stiffened. What about it? In the elevator, when you checked that it was still in your pocket, I heard the paper. The way you touched it suggested something precious, not just professionally, but personally. I understand that connection to creativity. Before I lost my sight, I used to sketch building concepts myself. You did? Alexander nodded. Architecture was my first love before business became my responsibility. My undergraduate degree is actually in architectural design from MIT, the same program you were accepted to. The revelation surprised Emma. She tried to imagine Alexander as a student, filled with creative ambition rather than corporate authority. So this is what professional kinship, she asked. Perhaps, he acknowledged, or recognition that talent shouldn't be wasted due to circumstances beyond one's control, yours because of financial hardship caused partly by my family's business, mine because of physical limitation. Before Emma could respond, the cafe door opened again, admitting a tall, elegant woman who surveyed the room before approaching their table. Though probably in her early 30s, she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Alex, darling, she greeted, bending to kiss Alexander's cheek with practiced familiarity. Diana told me I might find you here. Emma watched as Alexander's expression shifted subtly, not quite irritation, but certainly not pleasure. Vanessa, I wasn't expecting you. Clearly, Vanessa replied with a pointed glance at Emma. Won't you introduce me to your friend? Alexander's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Vanessa Porter, this is Emma Wilson, an architectural consultant. We are considering for the Harborside project. Emma, Vanessa is a friend of the family and works in our public relations department. Vanessa extended a manicured hand, her smile not reaching her eyes. Charming to meet you, Emma. Alex has always had an eye for talent. The emphasis didn't escape Emma, who shook the offered hand briefly. Nice to meet you too. Alex, your uncle is quite concerned about your absence from the office this morning, Vanessa continued. The Singapore investors are expecting updates on the commercial development, not this community project you've suddenly become fixated on. I'm well aware of Calvin's priorities, Alexander replied evenly. As I told Diana, I'll join the call remotely. My meeting with Ms. Wilson is important. Vanessa's smile tightened. Of course, I simply thought you might want a friendly reminder about perspective. Reed Global has shareholders to answer to, after all. The underlying message was clear. Alexander's interest in Emma and her project was being monitored and questioned. Emma felt a flash of indignation on his behalf. Blind or not, he was still CEO, not someone to be managed by family friends. Thank you for your concern, Vanessa, Alexander said with finality. Please tell Calvin I'll be in touch shortly. Recognizing dismissal, Vanessa nodded stiffly. Always a pleasure, Alex. Ms. Wilson. With a final appraising look at Emma, she departed, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. I apologize for the interruption, Alexander said once Vanessa was gone. My uncle's allies can be persistent. Was that a professional interruption or a personal one? Emma asked bluntly. Alexander's mouth quirked. Both, I suspect. Vanessa has aspirations that extend beyond her PR role. And you? My aspirations focus on rebuilding what was damaged during my absence, he replied, skillfully redirecting the conversation, starting with companies like your father's. Emma sipped her latte, considering his words. Let's say I believe your intentions are genuine. What exactly would my role involve in this community project? As Alexander outlined the details, a mixed-use development in a historically neglected Boston neighborhood, combining affordable housing with public spaces and local business incubators, Emma found herself genuinely intrigued. The project had real potential for positive impact, and the role he described would give her significant creative input. We'd want you to start immediately, Alexander concluded, working directly with our existing architectural team, but bringing your specific perspective on community needs. And if I accept the compensation but decline the job? Emma asked, testing. The offers are independent, Alexander assured her. The compensation is about making right a past wrong. The job opportunity stands on its own merits. Their conversation continued, delving into project specifics and Emma's ideas. As she shared concepts from her sketchbook, Alexander listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine understanding of architectural principles despite his inability to see her drawings. Neither noticed the man at a corner table surreptitiously photographing them with a small camera, nor did they see him leave shortly after Vanessa's departure, following her to a waiting car around the corner. Inside the vehicle, Vanessa examined the photos on the man's camera. Calvin will want to know everything about her, she said coolly. Family, financial situation, vulnerabilities, anything we can use. Already on it, the man replied. Preliminary. Research shows significant medical debt from her father's condition. Grandmother requires expensive medication. Brother applying to colleges they can't afford. Classic pressure points. Vanessa nodded in satisfaction. Alexander has always had a weakness for lost causes. Find me something we can use to make this particular cause too costly for him to pursue. Across town, Calvin Reed paced his office, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it takes, he snarled to the person on the other end. Alexander cannot be allowed to dig into the Hyperion acquisition details. Too many arrangements would be exposed. The Wilson girl is a complication we cannot afford. He paused, listening to the response. Yes, use whatever leverage necessary. If she's smart, she'll take the money and disappear. If not, well, everyone has secrets. Find hers. What Calvin couldn't know was that the most dangerous secrets weren't Emma's. They were buried in the files of Reed Global itself, in transactions and decisions made while Alexander was recovering from the accident that took his sight. Secrets that had remained hidden for years, but were now in danger of exposure because of a chance encounter in a stalled elevator during a storm. 2 weeks after accepting Alexander's job offer, Emma found herself immersed in the Harborside Community Project. Her small office on the 32nd floor of the Horizon Tower offered a breathtaking view of Boston Harbor, a constant reminder of the project's potential impact on the city she loved. Today, she was scheduled to present her initial concept designs to the full development team, including Alexander. Despite her growing confidence in her work, nervousness fluttered in her stomach as she organized her presentation materials. A soft knock at her door interrupted her preparations. Diana Harrison, Alexander's assistant, entered with her usual efficient grace. Emma, I'm afraid there's been a change of plans, Diana said, her expression troubled. The board meeting is running long. Calvin has raised concerns about the financial viability of the Harborside project. Emma's heart sank. Is Alexander cancelling our meeting? No, Diana assured her. He's asked if you could join him in the boardroom instead. He wants the board to hear your presentation firsthand. The implications weren't lost on Emma. This wasn't just a routine project meeting anymore. It was a defense of the entire initiative against Calvin's opposition. When? Now, Diana replied, already holding the door open. As they walked briskly toward the boardroom, Diana lowered her voice. I should warn you, Calvin has brought Vanessa Porter with him. She's prepared a counter-presentation focusing on a luxury commercial development for the same site. Of course she has, Emma muttered. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd become increasingly Aware of the subtle battle being waged within Reed Global, Alexander pushing for more community-focused initiatives, while Calvin and his allies advocated for traditional profit-centered projects. The boardroom fell silent as Emma entered. 12 executives in expensive suits sat around a massive mahogany table with Alexander at the head. Calvin occupied the seat to his right, Vanessa standing behind him with a tablet in hand. The contrast between the two Reed men had never been more apparent. Alexander radiating quiet resolve despite his sightless eyes, Calvin's face set in lines of calculated displeasure. "Ms. Wilson," Alexander acknowledged, turning toward the sound of her entrance, "thank you for joining us. The board has expressed interest in your preliminary designs for the Harborside project." The way he emphasized interest told Emma everything. She needed to know about the preceding discussion. This wasn't a planned presentation. It was a battlefield. "I'd be happy to share my work," Emma replied, moving to the front of the room. Diana quickly helped her connect her tablet to the presentation system, and her initial renderings appeared on the large screen. Emma took a deep breath and began, explaining her vision for a development that would serve the community while still providing reasonable returns. Her designs incorporated affordable housing units, public green spaces, and incubator facilities for local businesses, all integrated into an aesthetically striking complex that would enhance the waterfront rather than wall it off for the exclusive use of the wealthy. The key innovation here, Emma explained, highlighting a central structure, is the community hub. It serves as both an architectural focal point and a functional space where residents, local entrepreneurs, and visitors can interact. This creates a vibrant ecosystem rather than just another sterile development. "Very pretty," Calvin interrupted, his tone dismissive. "But the financial projections for this social experiment show returns significantly below our standard thresholds. Vanessa, please share the alternative proposal." Vanessa stepped forward, smoothly, replacing Emma's renderings with sleek images of glass towers and upscale retail spaces. "Our market research indicates that luxury condominiums and premium commercial spaces would generate 3 times the return on investment over a 5-year period." Emma watched as several board members nodded appreciatively at the projected revenue figures. The battle lines were clearly drawn: community impact versus profit maximization. "May I respond?" Emma asked, refusing to be sidelined. "Of course," Alexander said before his uncle could object. Emma reclaimed the presentation controls. The luxury development model has been applied repeatedly along Boston's waterfront, creating spaces that serve only the wealthiest segment of our population. What I'm proposing is not just a social experiment, it's a forward-thinking business model that addresses growing market demands for mixed-use, accessible urban spaces. She switched to a new slide showing long-term projections. While initial returns are indeed lower, sustainability metrics show stronger stability during market fluctuations. Moreover, the community integration model qualifies for significant tax incentives and public-private partnership funds that aren't factored into Ms. Porter's calculations. Calvin's eyes narrowed. "Those incentives are speculative at best." "Actually," Alexander interjected, "Emma has already secured preliminary commitment letters from 3 government agencies and 2 major foundations. Diana, please distribute the portfolio." As the board members reviewed the documents Diana handed out, Emma continued her presentation, growing more passionate with each point. This wasn't just about winning a corporate argument. It was about creating something meaningful from the ashes of what had been destroyed when companies like her father's were sacrificed for quarterly profits. When she finished, the boardroom was silent for a long moment. Finally, one of the older board members spoke up. "I'm impressed with Ms. Wilson's thoroughness. The community integration approach deserves serious consideration." "Alexander," Calvin said tightly, "may I speak with you privately before we continue this discussion?" "Anything you need to say can be said here, Uncle," Alexander replied evenly. "The board deserves full transparency." Calvin's jaw tightened. "Very well. My concern is that personal factors might be clouding your judgment regarding this project and Ms. Wilson's involvement. There are complications. in the history between Reed Global and Wilson Engineering that the board may not be fully aware of. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately, executives exchanging glances as they sensed the underlying conflict. "What my uncle is referring to," Alexander explained calmly, "is that Emma's father owned an engineering firm that was adversely affected by Hyperion's business practices before our acquisition. I've been transparent about this with the project committee and have established separation protocols to prevent any conflict of interest." What Alexander fails to mention, Calvin countered, is that his interest in Ms. Wilson appears to extend beyond professional boundaries, potentially compromising his objectivity. Emma felt heat rise to her face, both from embarrassment and anger at being discussed as if she weren't present. Before she could respond, another board member spoke up. "Calvin, I'm not sure that's relevant to evaluating the project on its merits." "It becomes relevant," Calvin insisted, "when coupled with certain irregularities I've discovered in the Hyperion acquisition, irregularities that occurred during the period when Alexander was recovering and I was managing daily operations." A tense silence fell over the room. Alexander's expression remained composed, but Emma noticed his hands tighten on the table edge. "What irregularities?" Alexander asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Instead of answering directly, Calvin turned to Emma. "Ms. Wilson, did you know that your father's company was specifically targeted during the Hyperion expansion? That certain executives were paid substantial bonuses to ensure Wilson Engineering lost its primary contracts?" Emma stared at him in shock. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the destruction of your father's company wasn't an unfortunate side effect of standard business practices," Calvin replied. "It was deliberate, and now I fear my nephew is attempting to use company resources to assuage his personal guilt over matters he wasn't even involved in." Alexander stood abruptly, his blind eyes somehow finding his uncle with unerring precision. "That's enough, Calvin." "Is it?" Calvin challenged. "The board deserves to know where their money is going and why. If you've developed personal feelings for Ms. Wilson—" "This isn't about my feelings," Alexander cut him off. "This is about the truth. Diana, please distribute the files from my private server. Access code Reed 73 Prime." Diana, looking shocked but resolute, nodded and stepped out momentarily, returning with digital tablets that she distributed to each board member. "What I'm sharing with you," Alexander explained as the board members began reviewing the documents, "is evidence I've been gathering for the past 3 months about unauthorized activities during my medical leave. Specifically, communications between my uncle and several Hyperion executives prior to our official acquisition talks." Calvin's face drained of color. "You had no right to access those files." "I had every right," Alexander countered. "They were on Reed Global servers, and I am the CEO. What I found explains why Calvin is so opposed to the Harborside project. It would place Emma in a position to potentially discover evidence of the targeted campaign against her father's company, a campaign that went far beyond normal business competition and into territory that might interest federal prosecutors." Emma's mind raced as she processed this revelation, the deliberate destruction of her father's company, the stroke that had followed, the years of struggle to keep her family afloat while her own dreams withered. All of it orchestrated, not just the collateral damage of corporate ambition. "You knew," she said, looking directly at Calvin, "you knew exactly what you were doing to my family." "Business is war," Calvin replied coldly. "Sentiment has no place in it." Alexander's father understood that, before the accident, my brother built this company on calculated risks and strategic eliminations, not charity projects and guilt payments. "That's where you're wrong," Alexander said quietly. "My father built this company on innovation and integrity. Yes, he was a fierce competitor, but he never sacrificed ethics for profit. That's something you never understood, Uncle." The boardroom had become a tableau of tension, executives absorbing the shocking documents before them, Calvin realizing. His position was crumbling, Alexander standing firm despite the personal betrayal, and Emma witnessing the unraveling of the mystery that had defined her family's tragedy. "I move that we pause this discussion and convene an audit committee," one of the board members finally said. "These allegations require thorough investigation." "Seconded," another added immediately. Within minutes, the formal procedures were initiated. Security was discreetly called to escort Calvin from the building pending investigation, his access credentials suspended. Vanessa Porter, seeing the tide turn decisively against her patron, slipped from the room without a word. As the boardroom gradually emptied, Emma remained rooted in place, overwhelmed by revelations that simultaneously explained everything and changed nothing about her family's circumstances. Alexander lingered as well, directing Diana to ensure the digital evidence was properly secured, before she too departed, leaving them alone. "Did you know?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you offered me the job, did you already know what your uncle had done?" Alexander moved carefully around the table until he stood near her. "I suspected something wasn't right with the Hyperion acquisition. The patterns were too convenient, the targeting too precise, but I didn't have proof until recently." "Is that why you reached out to me? To smoke out your uncle?" "No," Alexander said firmly. "I offered you compensation and a position because it was the right thing to do regardless of who was responsible. The investigation into Calvin was separate until he forced the issues together today." Emma studied his face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only weariness and resolve. "What happens now? To the project? To your uncle?" "The project will continue, assuming you still want to lead it," Alexander replied. "As for Calvin, that depends on what the full investigation reveals. Some actions may have crossed legal boundaries." A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Emma thought about her father, once vibrant and ambitious, now struggling to form complete sentences. About her grandmother, rationing medications to save money. About Tyler, whose college acceptance letters came with financial aid packages that still fell short. "I should be happy," Emma finally said, "seeing the person responsible face consequences. But it doesn't fix anything. My dad still had a stroke. Our lives are still derailed." Alexander nodded in understanding. "Justice rarely heals wounds completely, but perhaps building something meaningful from the aftermath can be its own form of restoration." He hesitated, then added, "Calvin was wrong about many things, but he was right about one. My interest in you has evolved beyond the professional. Ty should have been more transparent about that." Emma felt a flutter of something complex, not quite attraction, not quite hesitation. "That complicates things." "It does," Alexander agreed, "which is why I'll understand completely if you choose to continue the project under different supervision. Your work is too important to be compromised by personal entanglements." Before Emma could respond, her phone chimed with a text from Tyler. "Dad recognized me today. Said my name clearly. Doctors are calling it a breakthrough." Tears sprang to see her eyes as she read the message, the first positive news about her father's condition in months. Although she knew it wasn't directly related to the day's events, the timing felt significant, as if the universe were acknowledging that truth had finally emerged. "Good news?" Alexander asked, sensing her emotional shift. "My father," Emma explained. "He's showing improvement." Alexander smiled, genuine warmth transforming his features. "I'm glad to hear that." As Emma looked at him, this complex man who had entered her life through chance, yet seemed connected to her past and potentially her future through invisible threads of consequence, she made a decision. "I want to continue with the project," she said firmly. "And I think we need to acknowledge whatever this is between us, but proceed carefully. There's too much history, too much at stake." "I can work with carefully," Alexander replied, his smile deepening. "One step at a time." 6 months later, the groundbreaking ceremony for the Harborside Community Project drew crowds and media attention. Emma stood proudly beside Alexander as he delivered remarks about Reed Global's new direction, one that balanced profit with purpose, innovation with integrity. Her father sat in the front row, supported by his nurse but alert enough to understand the significance of the moment. Tyler, home from his first semester at college, recorded everything on his phone. In the distance, construction equipment stood ready to begin work on Emma's designs, now refined and expanded with input from community stakeholders. What had begun as a chance encounter in a stalled elevator during a storm had transformed into something neither Emma nor Alexander could have predicted, a partnership that was rebuilding not just a neglected neighborhood, but also the fragments of lives broken by unchecked ambition. Calvin Reed had been removed from the board, following a comprehensive investigation that revealed numerous ethical violations. While legal proceedings continued, his influence within Reed Global had been permanently severed. Alexander had emerged, stronger as a leader, his vision for the company's future gaining support from shareholders who recognized that sustainable success required more than just quarterly profits. As for Emma and Alexander, their relationship had evolved cautiously but steadily, professional collaboration gradually expanding to include shared meals, long conversations, and tentative explorations of a connection that defied simple categorization. The broken elevator that had forced them together now stood as a metaphor in their private conversations. Sometimes fate needed to trap you in darkness before you could truly see. "Ready?" Alexander asked as they prepared to ceremonially break ground on the project that had brought them together. Emma took his hand, guiding it to the ceremonial shovel. "Ready?" she confirmed, her other hand slipping into her pocket to touch the worn corner of her sketchbook. No longer just a repository of deferred dreams, but now a blueprint for possibilities being realized. Together, they turned the first soil of a project that represented more than buildings and spaces. It embodied redemption, second chances, and the remarkable human capacity to create beauty from brokenness. As the applause rose around them, Emma caught her father's eye. He smiled at her, a full, cognizant smile that contained pride, love, and understanding. In that moment, she knew that while the past couldn't be undone, the future remained unwritten, full of plans yet to be drawn and foundations yet to be laid. And sometimes that was enough. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Emma and Alexander's journey from conflict to connection has touched your hearts. Their story reminds us that sometimes our greatest challenges can lead to unexpected new beginnings. If you enjoyed this emotional tale of redemption and second chances, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories that explore the complexity of human relationships. We've prepared a special playlist of similar heartfelt narratives that you can find by clicking the link to your left. Don't miss our upcoming content. We bring you unique stories every day that will move you, inspire you, and perhaps even change how you see the world around you. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.